Hello, my name is Jenna Bosiger, and you're watching my Cryptid Cryptids YouTube channel. On this episode, I'm back in the Valley of the Mastodons, where I have already found evidence of prehistoric humans being in the area in the boulders and stones. After this recent photo shoot there, it's not a new concept, but I really start to wonder, is it just a coincidence that so many of the stones and boulders in this area resemble strange dinosaur creatures? Because, we already know for a fact there are dinosaurs underground in this area. So is it possible that there are also dinosaurs above the ground in this area in the form of molds made of stone of these once living dinosaur creatures? I know that, this is not a new topic, but I decided to just really take it further and come up with a very logical scenario for, the possibility of this actually being the case, that these are actually dinosaurs made of stone. So the first thing that I do is I just, want to make sure that it's even possible for living organisms to turn to stone. And it most certainly is. The definition, according to Oxford dictionaries, the remains of an organism preserved in the form of either, it could be a cast in stone, it could be a mold made in stone. And on a side note, I found out that there is more than one way to turn to stone. For example, I learned about a disease called fibrodysplasia ossificana progressiva, aka where slowly over time a person's soft tissues and organs turn to bone. They're either turned to bone or replaced with bone. And if you're wondering if bones can turn to stone, that is a definite yes. And apparently so can living soft tissues of an organism. Now, if you try to look up the dictionary definition for the word mud fossil, you won't find one, because that word comes from the Mud Fossil University, founded by Roger Spurr. And I love the fact that Roger Spurr has done so much research on this topic and trying to prove the legitimacy and apply science to the idea of a lot of these mountains and boulders actually being remains of giants from so long ago. It's not something that originated with him, because there's also the ancient legends, myths, history of the Tartarian giants whose civilization ended in a mud flood. The next thing I start thinking about, sort of the next puzzle piece to this, is I start thinking about how the casts of the victims from the volcanic explosion from Pompeii, like how were those created? And I start thinking, if I can, find out how those were created, then I can just kind of apply that scenario to how these stone dinosaurs were created. And so I do some research and find out, and I find a website called Pompeiian.com that goes on to explain that the way that these casts were made. So when the scientists decided to start the excavation of this site, it was a lot of time had passed since that natural disaster had occurred. And before they started excavating and digging down, they realized that the people had been trapped and encased and buried in this material that at one point must have been soft enough to form around them so tightly that it even recorded in 3D the expressions on their faces. And then what happened was that hardened, and over time the bodies decomposed, but these hardened cavities were still there underneath the ground, but they were filled with the hard parts of the body, like the skull and the teeth. But they were basically more or less empty, but still had the outer impressions of the people from that time, from when that happened. So they brought in an artist, and I'm imagining he had some kind of a tube that he used to fill in these cavities with a mixture of plaster of Paris, which then they allowed to harden and to dry and then harden, and which the scientists then later excavated. That's how they were created. So, putting that puzzle piece aside, I go to another factor in the whole case, which is the geology of Hemet. It is no secret that Hemet is at a very high risk for earthquakes, and it was really put into perspective when I looked on a website called homefacts.com that put this all, that used numbers and statistics and probability rates to really show how high of a risk Hemet is when it comes to earthquakes. According to them, Hemet has had a total of 43,396 earthquakes since 1931, and the USGS database shows there's a 99.38% chance of a major earthquake hitting Hemet within 30 miles within the next 50 years. And then in the history, Hemet had a 6.1 magnitude earthquake that happened in 1992. And then, according to an article in the press release news, there was a 6.7 magnitude earthquake that hit the San Jacinto Valley April 21st, 1918. And that was felt throughout all of Riverside County. Now, this brings me to something I learned in my natural disasters, in a natural disasters upper division college prerequisite course. And we learned about earthquakes, and the word that stuck in my head from that time is liquefaction. Liquefaction is something that occurs, it can occur is caused from earthquakes when the vibration resonates at a frequency that causes the ground to liquefy. And Hemet has been known to have this happen. It's got the right materials for this sort of natural disaster to occur. So that is definitely a factor in how these creatures could have been turned to stone. So, setting that puzzle piece aside, I then move on to, I decided to just take a look for myself using Google Sky Maps at the Yucatan Peninsula to see if I could find this, massive crater site that, caused the extinction of so many of the species living at that time. Right away, I think I see it. It seems very obvious that there's this big round crater depression, and it's filled with water, and it is the Gulf of Mexico. But apparently that's not it. It's a little smaller than that, but it's also located in the water. I majored in astronomy in college for a time, and I was, very obsessed with astronomy, and it was always on my mind. And so, it still is very much a topic on the surface that I think of a lot, and, it's something I think of often, astronomy facts. And so when I'm looking at this, for the first time, because I've always been taught that it was an asteroid that hit the Yucatan Peninsula and, was the cause of the extinction of the dinosaurs. But for the first time, when looking at this and thinking of this, it's like it just hit me like, no. This was a comet strike. And then I start thinking, how interesting. Is that how water gets deposited on, the surface of planets? And then I start thinking, the Bible makes it very clear that the giants were killed in a world flood, in a huge flood. And you know what would cause a world huge flood? A comet strike. And seeing that there's all this water in this location too. And then I just really start to imagine the physics, the planetary science, and the reality of this event actually taking place. The moment that it hit the Earth, just imagine what it sounded like. It's not even conceivable. It would have hit the ground and created this big hole, and then all this material would have shot up. At some point, the water melted. That's another interesting thing to think about. When did the dirty snowball melt? Did it melt upon entering the atmosphere and just start dripping down boiling water? Was it steaming, sizzling, or did it hit like with a splash, or did it hit like a hard snowball? Mind-boggling to think about the reality of this. But this did happen, and so then imagine just this ocean full of water, miles across, hitting the surface, and the way it would, at the first, it would just spread out everywhere before, and stir everything up, before eventually settling into the deep places like, the Gulf and the ocean or lakes. First of all, the ground would probably liquefy, inhabit, and these creatures that were alive at the time, they would have seen this coming. It wouldn't have taken a genius to see that, this thing getting brighter and brighter, and then like during the day, imagine it during the day when it was about to hit. What did it look like? Think of how it was messing things up already. It wouldn't take a genius. It would just take a creature with eyes to know that this wasn't going to end well. It's very easy to imagine from this explosion impact that the creatures of the time, especially in Hemet, were then, buried in the heat and the friction. Stone cement mixture filled into the crevices, just like they did in Pompeii, and then hardened, and then over 65 million years, as the surface, things wash away and it erodes, what is exposed are the partially buried remains of these organisms, these dinosaurs, that have been turned to stone. And it's totally possible. Look, you can argue the probability. I don't think you can argue the possibility. These really could be stone giants. Totally possible. I think I made my point, so I think that's where I will end this video. Now, before I wrap it up, I want to address the fact that it looks like I am actually going to be achieving this goal of reaching 1,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel. And so I want to thank everyone who subscribes and likes the videos and comments and watches, because that's all part of this learning process, and it is part of the creative process too, because it does affect how I improve on my videos. So before I'm even like thinking about what that achievement means to have reached that goal, I'm very focused on this next goal. And after I achieve that next goal, then I'm going to assess. But until then, that's all I'm really focused on. And that is probably going to take like the next 10 videos, starting with this one of me applying this new approach to making my videos more professional. And what I'm doing now is becoming hyper aware of anytime I come up with an idea, and also in describing how I formulated some of these concepts, where these thoughts have come from, where I get my information from, and how I sort of build, it together. And then also making sure that I only use royalty-free images and videos, because as an artist, I am a very visual person and I love to use photographs. A lot of the videos I want to make are about archaeological sites and places that I will never get to. And so I do rely on using other people's photos. But there is a way I can do this, by the book, and in a way that is going to make all my videos, leveling up. And at that point, then I'm going to be like, okay, have I plateaued? Is this it? But I really want to gain that experience and knowledge and make, add that, incorporate that into improving my videos before I, really question where I'm at on this YouTube channel, because I need to reach that goal. So 10 more videos and then we'll see where I'm at. But I'm really excited to start, stepping up, making my videos better by doing that and seeing how that improves them. So I just want to say thank you again, and, for being part of the journey and the creative process. And if you want to join me in that, then please subscribe. And until next time, bye.